Princeton, Princeton University and the president of Harvey Mudd College. But beyond her impressive academic and research achievement, she has been a relentless advocate for diversity in STEM, paving the way for future generations. Her work has inspired countless young minds to break barriers and redefine what's possible. So without further ado, let's dive right into Dr. Klawe. We're so excited to have you here. Could you please introduce yourself shortly to our general audience?
Hi, everyone. I'm Maria Klawe. I'm someone who loves math and computer science and who also believes that everyone, independent of race or gender or their family income status, the country they were born in, the country they grew up in, everyone deserves a career in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
Well, perfect. So, Maria Chloe, I again welcome you because it's an honor to host you at today's event because to be honest, we all know how renowned you are. And personally, as a host, I'm pretty much interested in mathematics and also computational geometry. So this session, I'm pretty much looking forward, like from yesterday, I was so much into excitement that, okay, I'm going to meet you and I really welcome you. And I would like to ask you some questions regarding your research life. So my first question is that because we already surveyed some of our participants beforehand and they submitted some questions to us and we formulate them, articulate them, and our general audience really want from you to answer those. So my first question will be, in your experience, how has the research culture in computer science and mathematics changed for women over the years?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think the thing I would say is that, I started out in mathematics, and at the time that I was an undergraduate student, perhaps, and then a PhD student, perhaps a little bit less than 10% of the PhDs were going to women. And I remember my professors saying to me, Maria, you have talents in so many different areas. Why would you choose mathematics where there are no great women mathematicians? Now, I'm very stubborn. So is my daughter, I'll just say. And so as a result, that made me more convinced than ever that I should get my PhD in mathematics. And I'll just say that my daughter, whose name is 𝗂𝗵𝗴, even though she had a lot of ability in math, she's currently one of the top peace negotiators in the world, and actually spent a year in Islamabad. So not Bangladesh, obviously, and in Pakistan, but I have never been to Bangladesh, but I have been to Pakistan a couple of times and to India as well a couple of times. So in computer science, it's different. I mean, I would say that, it's just very different because early on, there were quite a few female computer scientists who were leading researchers. And I would say also the environment in computer science was more friendly to women than the environment in mathematics. But what's surprising is that when personal computers became, common in society, and so in North America, that was in the early 1980s, all of a sudden people started to say that computers are a boy thing and not for girls. And a lot of that had to do because a lot of what kids did on computers was play computer games, and girls were much less interested in that than the boys were. And so we saw a fall in, the number of women in computer science in computer science majors going from being in the 40% range to down to about the 20% range or lower, particularly in very prestigious academic institutions, in just, between 1980 and let's say 2000. So it's just an interesting thing that in mathematics, the participation by women has increased. So the percentage of women getting PhDs in mathematics right now is about 30%. And in computer science, it saw this decline, and it's now back up to somewhere about 22 or 24%.
Well, I certainly agree with you. I would like to add one thing with you because I'm a high school student. I'm pursuing IBDP, that means International Baccalaureate in Austria. So I've been living in Europe for the past 5 years, and I have seen a lot of Bangladeshi from my country, a lot of girls who is really pursuing masters and also PhD in many renowned universities in Europe. And it feels pretty much great to see them because a country like Bangladesh, a third world country, there is a lot of opportunities right now, but instead of being a third world country, the women's that are pretty much fascinated and encouraged to pursue their future in PhD and research activities, it's pretty much convenient. And I very much hopeful that in recent futures we are gonna see a lot of people from a lot of spatial, a lot of women from our country, and also, of course, from South Asia to reach a certain level where we can say that okay, now the women's are really contributing as much as the man, and the stereotypical concept that okay, the women's are lagging behind in certain sector of our workforce or occupational objectives, which is going to be, of course, destroyed in my opinion. And I certainly believe that this 21st century, of course, is going to be for the women's. And as a man, it really makes me happy, and I really wish that my prediction really come out as a true one. So with that being said, I would like to ask you my second question to you. That was the question from our participants. They wanted to know, what advice would you give to young researchers looking to make meaningful contributions in computer science and mathematics?
Oh, that's a great question. So the advice that I give most people right now is to look at the impact of data science and AI, because it seems very clear that it's going to have a huge impact in many areas. And, whether we're talking about healthcare or about education or about technology, any of these areas, we think that's going to, I really believe that that's where there's going to be a lot of impact. The other thing I like about data science and AI is that if you, for instance, if you're super interested in biology or psychology or art or literature or any of these kinds of things, there are ways to do interesting and impactful things at the interface of AI/data science and those other disciplines. And for whatever reason, I think it's not uncommon for young women to be interested in not just computer science and math, but also, some other discipline as well. And so I think, what I always say is pursue your passion where society has a need. So in other words, if you love math and computer science, love the things that you love about it, but look at what is going on in society and where there are going to be more opportunities. And, one of the things that happened to me is I did my PhD in pure mathematics. I had a very good experience at the University of Alberta. I solved 3 20-year-old problems in my PhD thesis. That's a lot. And then went on the job market and realized that there were about 1,000 people looking for academic positions in North America in mathematics, in pure mathematics. I was lucky enough to get one of those 20. This is at Oakland University, which is in Michigan, and I hated it. And mostly I hated it because I've always loved teaching, but I was teaching, advanced mathematics to literally students who couldn't add fractions. And that just doesn't really work well. And
Yeah.
so one of the things that I learned was I could do the kind of mathematical research I was doing at that particular moment, but within the context of theoretical computer science. And the job opportunities in theoretical computer science were amazing. So the only problem is if you want to be in a computer science department, you actually have to know computer science more broadly, not just the kind of research that you're doing. So I went back to do a second PhD in computer science. I never finished it. I spent 9 months taking courses, and then I got hired by the University of Toronto to be a faculty member there. And at the time, they were one of the top 10 computer science departments in the world. And they're still one of the top 10 computer science departments in the world. So this thing about knowing what you love doing, but also paying attention to where the opportunities in society happen to be at the moment, it just makes a lot of sense.
Okay, I mean, that was obviously well answered, and I really think so that the answer will be helpful to our general audience. But I would like to add one thing regarding that stuff that you said about the data science, because I really consider it as one of the most influential, or maybe one of the most job perspective opportunity in future times. Because there has been a surveys that means at our school we conduct the surveys, and it said that most of the job, that is pretty much highly possible that the AIs might take over it. Like most of the jobs are like computer science, or you say software developers, back end, front end websites. I mean, these are the things that the AI can do, and we all should know how to use the AI quite effectively rather than the misuse of AI. I know the plagiarism is one of the aspect that the most of the academicians really think that okay, the students are plagiarized a lot of stuff, but in my opinion, I think so the data science, which is going to be a pretty much flourishing market in recent years. And of course our general audience will try to gather some information regarding it, because it's a vast topic, so you can't really get all the information at one session. But another question to you, that your research spans multiple domains, including theoretical computer science, mathematics, and human-computer interaction. How do you navigate interdisciplinary research, and what are the challenges and rewards of doing so? I mean, the
Uh,
last part of the question, you somehow answered it, but if you want to say it again.
well, no, I mean, one of the research projects that I spent about 10 years of my life on was from 1992 to 2022, 2002, was trying to understand whether or not we could create computer games that would increase both interest in and achievement for children in mathematics. And one of my reasons for doing this is that, so my son was 10 years old in 1992. So he, one of the things he really loved to do is play video games. And the easiest way to have an in-depth conversation with him was to talk to him about video games, what was going on in the game, who were the characters, what was the plot line, what were the challenges, etc. And what I realized, and so, I spent a lot of time talking to him about that. And one of the things I realized was that there was a lot of similarities between what we do in mathematics when we're solving a problem and what happens in video games. So in particular, what do we do in mathematics? We look for a pattern, we come up with a hypothesis about what the pattern is, and then we try to prove that that hypothesis does accurately describe the pattern we're seeing. Well, what do you do in a video game when you're playing? You try to find a pattern, you try to come up with a hypothesis about how you can solve this particular problem, and then you try to execute it to actually solve it. So it's very similar. And so one of the things so that was a very interdisciplinary project because it involved computer science, mathematics education, game design. We actually worked with a children's author because we wanted to have one of the things we started out with this particular project was to understand what girls liked in games, in computer games, and what boys liked, because we wanted to make sure that if we designed games that really helped with mathematics learning, that we were going to help girls as much as we helped boys. And one of the things we found out was that girls are very interested in storyline and character development, whereas this will not surprise anyone, boys and girls are also interested in collaboration in gameplay, and boys are principally interested in winning. They like fast action and they like problem solving too. And so we were looking for doing research on what kinds of games you could create that did those things. And I will just say, interdisciplinary research turns out to be way harder than disciplinary research. And the reason is that different disciplines put different values on contributions. And about 6 months into this project, I suddenly realized that a lot of people working the project were not terribly happy. And so I had one-on-one conversations with each of them, and each of them thought they were doing the most important thing in the project and that nobody else recognized that they were doing that. And, you know, maybe we had 6 people who were doing different things. They were all really important in the project. And so what I learned was that, first of all, you have to be very explicit about the fact that disciplines are different in what they place value on, and that for an interdisciplinary project to succeed, you have to be willing to acknowledge that and help each other recognize how people from different disciplines are actually making contributions. And, you know, that mathematics and computer science are much closer than, let's say, children's, the educating children, storyline development, game design, and mathematics and computer science are to each other. So that was just a good experience for me to understand that bringing interdisciplinary teams together is important, and how important it is for people to listen to each other and learn from the different perspectives.
Yeah, well, perfect. And I also think so, like the interdisciplinary research that you said, it's pretty much harder than the disciplinary ones. But regarding the challenges, you completely mentioned the most hardest one, of course. But my personal question to you, because I already said that I'm pretty much interested in mathematical sector,
Yes.
and I've been learning the graph theory. So it's a part of our curriculum, but it turns out to be the most exciting things, most easiest thing I've ever seen in my life. Yet there is something which is unsolvable. Let's say the Chinese postman problem. So if you want to do you really think that in some days that we're gonna really find the exact solution of Chinese postman problem? I mean, that's my personal question to you.
Yeah, I have no idea is the answer. I mean, it's certainly
Okay.
true that it's certainly true that there have been results that people really did not expect to be solved, and solutions were found. And it's also true that there are, problems that have been out there for a long time without any progress being made. And I'll give you, so there's a graph theory problem, so Ramsey theory problem, which is the Ramsey number of a double star. So a double star is you have 2 graph stars, so that's a vertex with several other vertices connected to it by an edge. So you have 2 of those, not necessarily with the same number, and then you have an edge in between the 2 centers of the stars. And back in 1979, I published a paper with Jerry Grossman and Frank Harari that gave a partial solution to the Ramsey number problem. And basically, if the sizes of the number of vertices attached to each of the star centers were close enough, we had an exact bound, an exact number. And if they were far enough apart, we had an exact number. And then in between, nobody knew. And I was quite surprised. I was giving a talk someplace in Vermont in maybe 2000 and something. And so, more than 20 years after we'd written the paper, and somebody came up to me and said, "Do you realize nobody's made any progress on that problem?" And then maybe another 10 years after that, somebody made some progress on it, but it's still not resolved. So that's a very simple problem in graph theory. And yeah, it's just sometimes it's hard.
Yeah. Well, that has been said. My last question to you. You have been a strong advocate for increasing the diversity in STEM, especially for the women. How has your own research been influenced by your advocacy or vice versa?
Oh, that's a great question. So I'll go back to my childhood to start out, in that
Yeah.
uh, I really wanted to be a boy. I mean, I felt like boys had all of the advantages in the world. And, it was uh, eventually I realized I wasn't going to be a boy, um, that I was going to be a girl. And I think a very big part of my advocacy for women in STEM has come out of that, because I decided that, okay, I'm probably not the only person who wishes they had all the advantages that boys have. And so what can I do to actually make it more possible for women to be embraced in areas where they're underrepresented, whether we're talking about math or engineering or computer science or physics and so on. And, initially when I started this out, so I don't know how to quite say this. So I tend to be, I think for many women of my age, so I'm 73, I'll be 74 in July. And I think for many women of my age who were, the first woman to hold the position they hold, and I've been the first woman to do X, Y, and Z, whether it's Dean of Science at UBC or Dean of Engineering at Princeton, President of Harvey Mudd, now President Math for America. And, when I became the head of the computer science department at UBC, I was not only the first female head of that department, I was the first female professor in the whole department, and I was the first female head of a department in the Faculty of Science. So, I'm sort of used to being the first one. And I think for many of us, one of the reasons that we were successful in a very male-dominated world is that we had similar leadership styles to men, in the sense that we were outspoken, we were persistent, we knew how to advocate for ourselves, all of those kinds of things. And, for quite a while, I sort of thought, that's the way you're successful. Well, that's ridiculous, because there are many different styles of leadership. And I think that the world is better if we have much greater diversity in leadership than we have today, in the sense that people with different backgrounds bring different perspectives. And when you have a diverse leadership team, you make better decisions because of that. And so, one of the things I probably realized when I first became a manager at IBM Research, which was when I was, I think, 32 or maybe 31, just before I turned 32, so more than half my life ago, was that, oh my goodness, there's not one right style of leadership. There's many ways of being an effective leader. And I was very lucky to have spent 8 years at IBM Research relatively early in my career, because one, they were proactive about giving leadership opportunities to women. And two, they had great professional development for managers. Now, one of the things I'll just say about academia is academia, often somebody gets made a department chair or a dean or a provost or a president without really any management training. And I think I'm a big believer that no matter how experienced you are and how old you are, you can always get better. And I feel just very lucky that I had the management education I got at IBM, because I think it was very helpful throughout all of my career. So, you know, I just feel strongly that we all learn, we all need to learn, we can all get better no matter what we're doing. And that there are many, many different ways of being effective.
Okay. So that was from my side. Thank you so much for answering those questions. And I really consider that, and I really believe that it was pretty much helpful to our general audience. So I'll give the floor to my co-host, 𝗂𝗶𝗶𝗴. She has some questions for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, Maria Chloe. Let me begin with how excited I am. I'm literally having palpitations right now and trying to take deep breaths. Um, my questions would be more personal than research oriented. I hope that's all right.
Absolutely.
Before I jump to my questions, I just had a question in my head pop up like right now after what you say. You said like you were the first in a lot of places, and I want to know, was it lonely? How you managed, to be, it's hard, right, to be the one with someone totally different in a whole setting, to be the one only woman among men. It's hard. So how did you manage? And was it lonely?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say is that I'm very lucky that I got married at the age of 28 to Nick Pippinger, who's also theoretical computer scientist and mathematician. And he has been enormously supportive. So I always had someone that I could go home to and say, you will never believe what happened to me today in such and such a meeting or whatever. That's one thing. The second thing is I made uh, I made friends with other women in leadership positions, even if they weren't in my institution. And because and I still, so one of the things I've done throughout my life is mentor others. And they could be older than me or younger than me. They could be male or female. That's not what's important. What's important is that one has the opportunity to talk about the challenges one's facing and to share strategies for what might or might not work or be effective in those problems. So that I would say that between my husband and between a sort of a network of people, of other leaders, I've not really felt lonely. But there are some things that happen when you're the only woman in a group that are worth learning some strategies to cope with. So one of the ones is you're in a room, you're the only female, and you say something in the discussion, and it's like nobody heard it. And sometimes somebody else says, a male says the same thing a few minutes later, and everyone goes, that's a great idea. So one strategy that I learned for coping with that is if I have a friend in the room, I will just ask them ahead of time, if I say something and nobody hears it, would you just repeat it? And then when they hear it from you, just say, and Maria said it first. And that actually is pretty effective. Now, I will be honest, I don't run into that problem so much anymore. And I think that's partly just, well, first of all, I know that if people don't respond, I know how to repeat it again myself and be heard. But it's also because I'm in a more privileged position, and people recognize that I have done a number of things now, and so it's more likely that I get listened to. So what's your next
Thank you.
question?
I once read this book and it said, like, there's this quote that stuck with me. It says, it's not about if we are good enough, but about if our reason is good enough. And I want to know what you think is the reason behind your drive and passion. Like, what helped you in your darkest moments when giving up was the easiest? What was the reason behind everything?
Well, I remember coming back from a meeting while I was Dean of Engineering at Princeton, and our son was coming over for dinner. And I walked into the, I walked back into the kitchen and my husband was making dinner. And I said, I just don't see why I have to be the person who runs into a brick wall every time. And my son said, Mom, someone has to make the mistakes that others can learn from. Okay, it was a joke, but one of the things I recognized is that that's really true, actually, that I talk a lot about first wave and second wave, and it's often the case that the first person who's proposing something new runs into a brick wall. Change is hard. And it's quite often the fact that the next person who proposes those things gets embraced, and it happens. So one of the things of the places I've worked, the place that was most resistant to change was Princeton University. And I think this is because it's such a successful university. And it's been around for a long time. And I had done, as the Dean of Engineering, I had done a strategic plan for the engineering school with the goal of raising resources, because the engineering school was much less well-resourced than the rest of the university. And Princeton is one of the wealthiest universities in the world. And the engineering school was not wealthy. And I had worked very hard to involve not only the faculty in the engineering school, as well as the staff and the students in the engineering school, but also faculty, staff, students from the entire university, and also the Board of Trustees. And the plan was actually endorsed by the Board of Trustees. And maybe, about 8 months after that, I was offered the position to become president of Harvey Mudd. And I decided to take it. And, I think there were sort of two things contributing to my taking it. One was Princeton was so resistant to change. And I thought it would be easier to actually show that women and people of color could thrive in a rigorous STEM education in a place like Mudd, because Mudd has such a tradition of innovation in pedagogy and curriculum. And then the other thing is, I didn't really like living in New Jersey, and moving back to California seemed like that would be really nice. And now I'm living in New York City and on the East Coast, and I like it fine. So it wasn't the East Coast, it was more New Jersey that I didn't particularly like. But the thing that was really interesting was when I decided to leave, the department chairs of the 6 departments in the School of Engineering at Princeton went to the president and provost and said, you can't hire an external dean because we have the strategic plan. It's our strategic plan and we want to do it. And if you hire an external dean, they'll want to create a new strategic plan. Well, for 10 years after I left, Princeton University followed that strategic plan. And I often say that I had way more impact by leaving Princeton, because they were so shocked that I left, than I would have had by staying. So, it's just very interesting. If you're somebody whose passion is to create change, which is definitely mine. There are lots of different ways that can help you be effective in doing that. And, you know, some trustees came to visit me while I was at MUD to tell me that they understood why I left, because they could see what I had done at MUD and how impressive it was. And, you know, and all the things I had asked to happen at Princeton actually happened within 10 years after my departure. So it's just interesting what causes change to happen.
Weren't you scared when you left Princeton? Like, what if it did not work? What if you couldn't make that change in Harvey as well? What if Princeton went on with their tendency of like being not so inflexible? Weren't you scared?
No, I'm not usually scared. Fear is not something that I have. It's funny, you know, like I mentioned my husband that I'm married to, and, you know, we're very good partners because I have no inertia and he has inertia. And, you know, so I'm always willing to try something new. And I would get into a lot more trouble if I weren't married to Nick, because he'll, you know, like I'll say, well, we're going to do X. And he'll say, but what about Y and Z? And I'll go, yeah, those are really good points. And we'll deal through Y and Z. And then I'll go, and now we can do X because we've solved Y and Z. And he'll say, no, 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 what about A and B? And so it goes. And so when we finally do whatever it is, which we pretty much always do, it works out well. So I think, so one of the things I talk about is, and that I really believe in, is that, first of all, persistence matters, but also the willingness to, persistence and hard work matters, but also the willingness to consider a different strategy if you're not making progress. And so in a sense, going to MUD was considering a different strategy. And it turned out to be excellent for me and excellent for Princeton.
If you were to see yourself from a third person perspective, would you call yourself successful?
Oh, so that's a great question. So I don't particularly, first of all, I know I am very successful. That, I mean, I do understand that. I feel like a failure most days. And I think this, you know, I often talk about this because I think many successful women often feel like a failure. And I claim it's a recipe for being successful, because I think one of the reasons I often feel like a failure is because I'm aiming really high. And I think it's good to aim really high. But, you know, you could aim really high and then you could come in like there and you would feel like a failure, and you would sort of think about, well, what could I do that I could change it to being like that? And so, you know, the way I sort of talk to people about it, so I often talk about the imposter syndrome, including to, I would talk about this to first-year students in their first day of classes at Harvey Mudd, because I think, so Harvey Mudd is a very, the curriculum is very challenging. On the other hand, it's very highly collaborative. And what I would say is, you know, you come here and you're one of the top students in your high school, and all of a sudden you feel like, oh my God, there's all these incredibly talented people around me. I think the admissions folks made a mistake in letting me in. And I talk about that and I say, when you feel that way, that's a good sign, because what you really need to do is you need to really think about what you need to do to be successful. And one of the things that's very helpful in being successful yourself is to help other people be successful. and let them help you be successful. And that's the thing I love most about MUD is the rule is that it's every student's responsibility to help every other student succeed. And I sort of think about that in my career as well, that it's important for me to help as many people succeed as possible in their careers, because that will make the world a better place.
I'd like to ask you to give us young people who are still, because most of us are like still trying to figure out which way in life we want to go. So
Yeah.
what's your advice for youth regarding career in goal in life? What route to start? What route to head to if they feel lost? And things like that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think about this a lot. And I think I had 3 things I wanted from my life. The first one was I knew I wanted to have children. That was, I mean, just something that was important to me from the very beginning. I knew that I would prefer to have children with a partner who was a good partner, and that I would like to share my life with a partner. And I knew I wanted to have impact. Those were the 3 things. And the day I met my husband was the day I swore off men for all time. That was in the morning when I swore off men for all time. And then I met my husband. I had no romantic interest in him whatsoever. I mean, he was such a nerd. I mean, he showed up in my office. He was going to be the speaker, the seminar speaker the next day. He showed up in my office. His hair was slicked back. He had glasses on that were like 1/4 of an inch thick. He was wearing corduroys that were too big for him, but they ended 4 inches above his feet. I mean, just like, I would never think of this as a potential partner. He walked into my office and he noticed that I did not have a ring on my finger, and he thought I was very attractive, and he was smitten, and I had no idea, of course. Well, we're engaged to be married about 5 weeks later. So
5 weeks?
5 weeks, yes. And I lived in Toronto and he lived in New York, outside New York City. So, yeah. I mean, it's just so impossible.
You should write a book about this. This is so interesting. You should literally write a book about this.
Yes, I'm planning on writing a book at some point. But, you know, like, how could that happen?
Oh my God, I love it.
Yeah, yeah. So, and, you know, maybe 10 days after we had met, he had come back for another visit because, I mean, he knew he wanted to marry me. And we're having conversations about how many children would you want to have, et cetera. I mean, it's just like, it's crazy. So anyhow, so I feel incredibly lucky that I was able to, we will have been married for 45 years in a couple of months. So I feel incredibly lucky that I was able to share my life with someone I love so much. I feel incredibly lucky that we were able to have kids, and I now have 3 grandchildren. And I'll just say, our son Yannick, I mean, I already mentioned our daughter, who's a peace negotiator. Our son Yannick, he's a computer science math geek like his parents. He works for a quantitative hedge fund called Jane Street in New York City. He's married to 𝗂𝗵𝗶𝗿, who is born in Pakistan, though grew up much of her life here. She's an ophthalmologist, and they have these 3 adorable children. So Zayn, who is 6.5, Zara, who's almost 5, and Zia, who's like 1 1/3. And you know, so one of the reasons we're now in New York and on the East Coast is because of the grandchildren, which is just means something wonderful. But, you know, those were the things that I wanted. And initially, I didn't really understand how I could have impact by doing pure mathematics. And eventually I realized that I could have impact by doing mathematics and or theoretical computer science, or eventually the 𝐒𝐵MS project, which was the interdisciplinary one I told you about. But that I would have the most impact through actually taking on leadership roles where I could make more significant changes to organizations. And so, you know, that's what led me into, when we moved back to Canada, which was back to Canada for me, but my husband was American. When we moved to UBC, we went there because they wanted to build a world-class computer science department, and I wanted to lead that effort. When I became the senior vice president for IT and student academic services, I wanted to, I mean, this is going to sound crazy, but I wanted to, this was 1995, the World Wide Web was happening, and the university didn't have any plan to network the campus or to provide faculty and staff with computers, with workstations. And I also wanted to fix the problem that students didn't feel supported. So I had those two problems, and I took the vice president job and I fixed those two problems. And then I became the dean of science because I realized that I preferred being an academic leadership position than a service leadership position, which is what the vice president role was. And I doubled the number of female faculty in 4 years. And then I went to Princeton because it's hard to change the culture of STEM from Canada. And I figured that if I went to the US to a showcase university, I could probably do that. Well, you've already heard that Princeton was very hard to change, and that led me to Harvey Mudd. And now I'm back here because I have 3 grandchildren, and I love working with math and science teachers. And I'm very interested in seeing what we can do to increase the percentage of children from low-income backgrounds in New York City who end up going into STEM majors in college, because I think pursuing a STEM major is the best way to have a great career. So every single time I have taken a role because there's something that I want to make happen.
My last question is kind of a personal question that I have. It's almost an impromptu one. So I have always been driven by this urge to make a change, make a difference, make change happen in general, like things that I didn't like was happening, or things that I thought would make things better. And I have always, ever since a child, I have always been walking against the crowd. It's not a big deal for me, and it just comes naturally for me to walk against the crowd if that's what I have to do. But the more I grow up, the more these thoughts come in my head, like, if what I'm thinking is better for the world, is it just me being stubborn, or is it really like that? Because no one else seemed to have that same thought. No one seems to be echoing that whatever I'm saying. And you say the thing about no one listens when you say, and I have encountered that a lot. And my question is, how do I differentiate between what is me overthinking and what is actually, like, how do I get myself educated to that point? Because I'm like interested in so many stuff, psychology, economics, social business, and everything, but I'm going to start my undergraduate in a year, inshallah. And it's like, I can't study all of that, right? The highest I can do is double major. That's 2 subjects. But how am I going to educate myself in every subject that I want to explore, so I can differentiate what is actually something that is needed and what is just me being stubborn?
Yeah, so first of all, stubbornness is good. And having lots of interests is good too. The thing I usually say is, you can do everything you want with your life, but not all at the same time. So I would do a double major. You can maybe add a minor. And I would look at pick the 2 subjects that seem like they will open the most doors for you. So probably economics is a good one. And then, pick one other one with that. And the reason I say economics, I think it's a discipline that helps you understand a lot of things in society. And so my mother was an economist, and I took first-year economics and really enjoyed it as a perspective to see things. But you pick 2 of the things, but look at what the job opportunities are in terms of what doors those will open. In terms of having ideas, so it's often the case that there are some people, and I think you're probably like that, and I think I'm generally like that, they see things before other people see. And one of the important things to do is to learn how to build a network with people who have similar kinds of visions, and how to reinforce what other people, have other people reinforce the ideas that you think are important. And it's just one of these things that learning how to, one of the things I often say is that outsiders get heard more easily than insiders. And so sometimes in order to have something heard in your organization, it's better to have someone else come and say it. And it's looking for different strategies that allow your ideas to be heard. It doesn't matter whether you get the credit for it. What matters is that the idea moves forward. So, the other thing is patience and persistence do help. And it's easy to be very impatient and to want change to happen fast. But, life is long. And, I feel very lucky to be still in a position, where I'm able to create change. And I'm probably more than 3 times your age. Maybe I'm 4 times your age at this point.
Yeah, you are almost 4 times my age. I'm only 19.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yes, there you go.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, we're pretty much end to our today's session. And again, on behalf of CORViS, to be honest, I'm very much grateful and convey my best gratitude to your future endeavors. And we really hope so that you'll be in Bangladesh in future, maybe. It's a beautiful
Yeah.
country, lots of greeneries, people are nice, so hospitable, and I reckon you like it a lot. And yeah, of course, again, from the board of directors and also executives and CORViS, thanks for organizing such a cool event with Maria Chloe. And we think that we'll be able to get back with you guys with some of other exciting academical sessions alongside with some cool stuffs for admission process. And with that being said, I'm really thankful. I really convey my best thanks to our general audience to be with us, because they have waited for 1 hour for that session, and they've registered a lot like beforehand. It really means a lot. So it really conveys the message to us that these are the pretty much organic ones. And of course, the session was pretty much helpful. In my opinion, I really enjoyed it. And thank you so much again.
Well, I enjoyed it too. And it's lovely to meet all of you. Bye.
Thank you so
Perfect.
much.
Bye.
Bye.